Students, today I shall be taking up a sonnet by Wordsworth. Wordsworth's sonnet entitled On the Extinction of Venetian Republic. It is a very interesting poem because this is a poem which, along with some other poems of Wordsworth, can be termed a political poem. You all are perhaps aware of the fact that in his youth, Wordsworth was actively interested in the politics of the day. The French Revolution, with its fiery slogan of liberty, equality, and fraternity, definitely impressed the Romantic poets, especially Wordsworth and Coleridge, the senior Romantic poets. And the people's urge for freedom was something that impressed the poet tremendously. The French Revolution, which started in 1789, was in fact an event that had a great impact on the entire Europe. Wordsworth, in fact, went to France in 1791, and there he became friendly with a few political persons, and in fact there he often joined political sessions, and the man with him he became rather friendly was Michael Bopu, and he attended certain sessions of the National Assembly and the Jacobin Club, and Wordsworth's political convictions were strengthened. But subsequently, the reign of terror, the bloodbath, the indiscriminate killings that spread throughout the country, France, disillusioned the Romantic poet. He was more disillusioned when the urge for political freedom of the people was now replaced by the aggressive motives of a man called Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, it is said, tried to give importance to the two terms equality and fraternity, but liberty became almost a misnomer. In France, Napoleon wanted to dominate the entire Europe, and his policy of aggression was an affront to people's desire for freedom. Now, this poem on the extinction of Venetian Republic was written in 1802. The Republic of Venice fell in the year 1797. The incident of the fall of Venice definitely affected Wordsworth, and some 5 years later he composed this poem on the extinction of Venetian Republic. Now, first of all, let us look at the title of the poem, On the Extinction. Extinction means abolition. The republic or the republican character of Venice was abolished by the imperialist design of an autocrat. A man who was thought to be the champion of freedom, a man who was greeted by the people of France to lead their movement, soon assumed the role of a despot. And Venice, the Republic of Venice, now what is a republic? You all know. The republican government consists of the elected representatives of the people. A republic, in other words, is just the opposite of a despotic monarchy. So, the Republic of Venice fell. The Venetian Republic was extinct, and Wordsworth took this as a significant affront on democracy and freedom. Now, Wordsworth's initial period of active participation in politics soon ended, as I said, after his disillusionment with the French Revolution. But the sadness of the romantic poet who had in him a republican spirit, who in his youth was greatly influenced by Godwin and his great book Political Justice. A man who even wrote a letter to a bishop who supported the French Revolution, who supported the kings, who supported monarchy, and who in one of his sermons said that all the people, including the rich and the poor, would definitely want the French Revolution to end, because perhaps this was the desire of God. And Wordsworth took up his pen against such a sermon by a bishop, and he wrote out a letter, a long letter. He didn't publish the letter, but he wrote out a letter where he, in fact, quoted from Thomas Paine, and there he wrote, "Equality without liberty cannot exist." So there can be no equality if there is no liberty, and there can be no liberty if the rights of the people are not approved, acknowledged. So this was Wordsworth, and this spirit of Wordsworth definitely stayed with him, remained in him throughout, although gradually from politics, from active politics, he was retiring, and his disillusionment, he thought, could be healed by the benign influence of nature. But as I said, this poem, which was written in 1802, laments the fall of Venice. Now I shall first read out the poem. It's a small poem. We can read out the poem, and then I shall try to discuss the poem briefly. On the extinction of Venetian Republic, composed probably August 1802 and published 1807. Now the poem. Once did she hold the gorgeous East in fee, and was the safeguard of the West. The worth of Venice did not fall below her birth. Venice, the eldest child of liberty, she was a maiden city, bright and free. No guile seduced, no force could violate. And when she took unto herself a mate, she must espouse the everlasting sea. And what if she had those glories fade, those titles vanish, that strength decay, yet shall some tribute of regret be paid when her long life hath reached the final day. Men are we, and must grieve when the shade of that which once was great is passed away. So this is the poem. So the eldest child of liberty, what was Venice? The eldest child of liberty, long history. Venice had a long history of freedom. Its republican culture was long. And, well, look at the first line of the poem. Well, once again, look at the first line of the poem. Once did she hold the gorgeous East in fee. Now, the glory of Venice was perhaps a befitting match for the grand and rich Oriental countries. And it was a safeguard of the West. And it was perhaps a country which saved Europe from the aggression of the Turks. Now, perhaps the reference is to the Ottoman-Venetian War, which continued from 1463 and ended in 1479. Now, immediately after the fall of Byzantine, the fall of Constantinople, well, the Turks invaded Europe and there were bloody warfares. Well, the prolonged war saw some initial defeats and then victory for Venice. Venice could uphold her freedom, and in a way she saved the rest of Europe. As if Venice fought for freedom and she was the champion of freedom. And she remained as a safeguard for the entire Europe. So this is Venice. But what happened to Venice finally? Well, finally, this Venice, this great, this grand and historical Venice had to fall. Well, this was the machination of Napoleon Bonaparte. The French army was sent to Austria, and the French army had to go through Venice. Now, the French army, while passing through Venice, secretly supported the Jacobin revolutionaries in Venice. The state of Venice decided to resist this, but it could not stand before the formidable French army, and the Venetian Republic collapsed under the threat of Napoleon. And therefore, the freedom of Venice had to go after 1100 years of its republican existence. So, this was the fall of Venice, or rather, this was the extinction of the Venetian Republic. Now, well, the poem by Wordsworth, sings the glory of Venice, its past glory. Venice, the eldest child of liberty. Why Venice is called the eldest child of liberty? I have just told you that for 1100 years it could retain its existence, its republican existence. But after this prolonged period, it had to fall. It had to submit to the formidable army of Napoleon. And Wordsworth here in this poem has done two things. He has introduced history and myth. Historical fact I have just pointed out, and myth is there. There is a myth that after the great victory of Venice, there started in Venice a ceremony. And it could be called an annual marriage ceremony. That Venice, the maiden city, could only be married to the sea, the Adriatic Sea. The city of Venice could not have any other mate. So, the proper mate or husband or spouse for Venice would be only the sea. And therefore, in Venice there is an annual ceremony. An annual ceremony takes place, the ceremony of ring dropping. It's called the ring dropping ceremony. Boats, they go to the mid-sea, the mid-ocean, and ring is dropped into the water as a symbol of a marriage ceremony, as a symbol of union between the sea and the country. So this was Venice, who was the wife of only the Adriatic Sea, the great Venice. Venice, who was as great and grandiose as any oriental country. Venice, which could uphold its freedom for long 1100 years. Venice, which could resist the Turks. Venice, which could only be the wife of the sea. Such a country finally had to submit to the French army. And Wordsworth laments that those glories gradually faded. But even though the city has lost its glamour and glory and grandeur and pomp, we have to remember how glorious it was. Human beings must remember the glory of Venice. its glorious republican past. Now, a few more lines I shall read once again. Her long life hath reached its final day. Her long life hath reached its final day. Men are we, and must grieve, when even the shade of that which was great is passed away. So if we are human beings proper, if we have the human heart, if we have the human sensibility, we must mourn the passing away of the Republic of Venice. The extinction of Venetian Republic must not go unsung, unmourned. So it must be mourned. Therefore, we can say that in a way, Wordsworth is denouncing the aggressive attitude of Napoleon. Aggression, invasion, subjugation of other countries, and subjugation of the people, and snatching away their rights and freedom must be condemned. This is what Wordsworth suggests in his On the Extinction of Venetian Republic. Now, it has been suggested, perhaps very correctly, very truly, that this poem in fact is addressed to his own countrymen, the Britons. The Britons must be aware of their freedom, and the situation in Europe was gloomy. It was necessary for the Britons, perhaps, to uphold their spirit and to resist any such aggression on their freedom, on their rights. So, On the Extinction of Venetian Republic is not simply about Venice, it is also a poem which concerns the poet's own country. It is a plea for the freedom of the people. Not only the freedom of Britons, perhaps freedom of all people. Not only of Europe, perhaps of all the people of the world. Thank you.